Sorry, we have a quorum of the committee with Chair Gibbs, Supervisor Lemmer, and myself here, and Vice Chair Marshall remote. Anybody else join? And Supervisor Poole. Supervisor Hart is excused, so we will go on to public comments. Nobody has approached either the clerk or myself, so we will move on to the minutes of the October 8th and 13th meetings, which were in the packet. Are there any questions, or what are your wishes? Supervisor Lemmer moves to approve the minutes. Is there a second? Seconded by Chair Gibbs. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of approval of the minutes of the October 3rd and October 8th and 13th meetings signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Update on tax delinquent parcel project and consideration of the taking of tax deeds. Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So within your packet is a memo beginning on page 4 that my staff put together for just a brief update on the process. Again, in terms of action today, we have 17 parcels that are listed. I believe one or more may have paid since we put this together. But in any event, looking for approval from the committee, one, to proceed with the taking by tax deed on any of those 17 parcels that are listed beginning on page 6 and continuing on to page 7 that will not pay by the 3rd of November. The other part that I'm looking for action today is how do you want to proceed with respect to the inclusion of deed restriction language on those parcels? Again, if you look in the actionable parcel list, you'll see that the vast majority are improved. That is, that they have a structure on them that would, from our initial review, indicate that it's highest and best uses for housing. But in terms of a general update, I can say that the process continues to go well. We have people continuing to make payments on those parcels, both the batch that we had go through the tax deed process, but also through the in rem process. So on page 8 is a little graphical representation on the initial batch of 53 properties that we identified to move forward with tax deed. So we had 15 parcels pay, 3 were removed from the process. 8 we did take previously. The reason that we were able to proceed with taking there is that the notice, as we were going through the tax deed process, we essentially had to split that original batch into 2 because notice was returned on a number of them. Interestingly, we did have, pursuant to your process, a number of parcels. We had 2 that were repurchased by the owners after we did proceed with taking them. Now, what does that mean? That means that not only they paid the repurchase price was set equal to the amount of delinquent taxes that were owed, but they also paid off all the liens that were docketed against the property. So any of those lien holders were made whole as well. We have 4 appraisals that are in the process, and then we have 2 parcels that we are proceeding with evictions. One of those parcels is utilized for storage. It's not an eviction of an individual living there. The second parcel, my understanding, it is occupied, but local law enforcement, from my understanding, is well aware of that parcel as they respond to it frequently or have received complaints on it. So overall tax deed going quite well. You'll see the yellow area. We have those 17 parcels that I referenced that are before you today for direction from the committee on 1, can we proceed with taking, and then 2, if you have direction relative to the inclusion of that deed restriction language that is provided for within your ordinances. I won't go into the in rem process. I gave you that update previously, but that batch again began with 97 properties. We have a number that had to be removed due to bankruptcy or probate, but we're continuing on in that process as well. So overall, continue to make good progress. And with that, Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions you might have and assist in any of the discussion you may have relative to those deed restrictions.
So as it relates to bankruptcy and probate, bankruptcy discharges debt from a point certain back, not forward. Have we evaluated the bankruptcy to see if there is still a continuing obligation associated with the failure to pay taxes in those cases? And where are we relative to the probate? If the heirs don't choose not to take the property, there's a mechanism for us to acquire that through tax deed.
I'll let Brian take the bankruptcy piece, but my understanding is there's a stay as a part of the bankruptcy. With respect to probate, there's a court order that has essentially halted our taking of the property, excuse me. But once the heirs are identified and that parcel would move through, the obligation to pay those taxes remains.
I will start by saying that I am not a bankruptcy attorney, and I purposely avoided that class and those books when I was in law school, and tax, so I'm not a tax attorney. But with bankruptcy, the taxes do not get discharged. You'll get what's called the cram down, where they give the person, I think it's 5 years to pay off the taxes. That's generally part of their repayment plan that goes with a Chapter 13. And if the person doesn't make those payments as required by that bankruptcy plan, then one of the creditors can actually have that vacated. That gets rid of that cram down, and then the taxes are due and owing like they would normally be. So
again, so if hypothetically, I were delinquent and declared bankruptcy in 2020. So there's a 5-year cram down opportunity to pay back the delinquent taxes prior to 2020. What about those from 2021 through 25?
They don't change. They're still in effect.
yeah, those are still required to be paid.
So do we track those on those, on the bankruptcies? Do we make sure that we haven't, as a result of their declaring bankruptcy, incurred additional tax liens or going forward? So in the case of 2020, we would be eligible to take the property now. I just would ask that we look at that.
Sure.
The bankruptcy before that period covered by the bankruptcy?
We certainly can do that. I would just say my understanding is how we reference these in the summary memo is we had a couple of parcels that are within a bankruptcy, so there's a stay on us moving forward. It's not that any taxes are, to Brian's point, discharged, or I don't believe there's been a report by or an order by the court or the bankruptcy trustee as to what the next steps are, but we cannot proceed with taking because there's a stay regarding the overall property itself. But we can certainly look into that and keep the committee informed of next steps.
All right, so it's here for information, but the administrator is also looking for guidance relative to the parcels that are listed. I think there are 5 unimproved and 12 improved properties. Consistent with what we've done in the past, the county has adopted a policy where we put the deed restrictions on the parcels, and the committee has decided that they wanted to evaluate whether or not that impacted the value, particularly in light of the Hennepin case and some of the state statutes in terms of the rights of the property owner to recover excess proceeds from the sale of the parcel at the time that the county sells it. So what are your wishes? Supervisor Lemmer.
I was really just wondering, we've already said we're waiting on some properties. What happened with them? Do we know anything yet? We don't know anything. So do we have a timeline on when we're going to know something?
Absolutely, that it's in the memo. Your ordinance, we can't proceed to sell any of the parcels as of yet because owners have the ability to repurchase for a period, then we have the opportunity and we will proceed to list them. But as of right now, we actually have not sold any of the parcels because I believe, don't hold me to this, but within your ordinance, I believe it's the former landowner has 90 days to repurchase. So while we've proceeded to taking and actually have taken possession, we haven't been able to list any. So I can't report back on whether or not there was any discernible impact on sale price.
Chair Gibbs.
So really, two questions, and I think you answered one of them, and that is, we don't know whether there's a discernible difference with putting deed restrictions on those parcels, because previously we've authorized taking and putting deed restrictions on some parcels and not putting deed restrictions on others. But the question I have is, if we proceed with taking today without direction of putting deed restrictions, can deed restrictions be placed on the property at a later point? Once we find out what the disposition, if there's a disposition difference on the parcels with and without deed restrictions?
I think from a timing perspective, I think that's something you can do. Again, the action we need is, can we proceed with taking if the parcels don't pay by that November 3rd date. On the legal question, I'll kick that to Brian as to whether or not we can do it at a legal date, but I don't legally do it at a later date, but I don't think there'd be any bar.
I think as long as we own or have the deed to the property when we go to sell it, I think we can always put a deed restriction on it. So I don't know that it has to be done at the time that the property's taken per se. So that would be my take on it.
And again, you're gonna have a considerable period because we have that
90-day reclaim
that
period.
repurchase period.
Supervisor Poole.
I'm in favor of moving forward to take the delinquent properties. However, I think a good idea to hold off on the deed restrictions if we can. I'm not in favor of deed restrictions unless it's proven that they're needed.
I would like to point out that this county board, this session, did adopt a policy where we would impose the deed restrictions on those properties. So we're technically in violation of that action of the county board. I'm not comfortable just saying we shouldn't do it because we should go back and revisit the action of the county board if there's a desire not to do that. But having said that, I think we have a 90-day window in which we can make that determination. So I would perhaps suggest that we take the action of doing the taking or authorizing the takings, and then within that 90-day period, make the determination of whether or not, which of the properties, if any, should have that deed restriction put on it. Supervisor Poole?
Actually, I want clarification on that, and I don't think that's correct. What I recall is this committee forwarded on the question of deed restrictions is that this committee would have the option of putting it on or not. It wasn't mandated that we do that, and I believe that Corp Counsel Pruner before confirmed this, so I'd like clarification on that. So I think it's still an open question. It's up to this committee if we want deed restrictions on these properties. It's not required, is my understanding.
Well, I think nonetheless, I think we've got that 90-day window, but I think when it went through the EEEDC committee and this committee, I think we envisioned that in order to deal with the housing shortage, that we would try to get these restrictions on to try to address that housing shortage. But again, we've got a window in which we can take action, and what are your wishes? Chair Gibbs.
I'd make a motion to move forward with taking of the 17 properties listed on page 6 and I think it's 6 and 7 of the packet, and revisit once we have clarification on whether or not deed restrictions impact its value on the disposition of those other parcels.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Lambert. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of adoption of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. We will move on to WPS request for easement on Packer Drive in Wausau. Is that Chris?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, thank you. This easement is more straightforward in the sense that currently the properties that are being served are, the gas is coming through 6845 Packer Drive on a shared service line. So what WPS's intent is to redesign the services so that they'll each be on their own separate service lines. And it's serving the juvenile facility and the Sunnyvale Park.
Chris, as I looked at that, there's an existing easement and there's a new easement. Is it intent to continue with both easements or to abandon one of the easements in lieu of the new easement coming in?
It's a good question. When I talked with WPS about it, they didn't mention abandoning the old one, though that's what they did at Marathon Park with the redesign there. So I'm not sure if there are other lines that they're leaving in to service another portion of that area. But this new easement would provide the lines just to have that dedicated lines to each of the facilities versus the shared service. So, but they didn't mention anything about abandoning the existing.
Any other questions? Obviously, they would need to maintain that easement until they got a new power supply in. But perhaps we could look at it when they give us the final map with the thought that if they could abandon that easement, that it be abandoned at that time.
I can certainly follow up with them.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, what are the wishes relative to the WPS request for the easement on Packer Drive? What are the wishes? Chair Gibbs.
Make a motion that we approve the easement, the new easement, with the understanding and the discussion with WPS once the new easement is in place, if there's an abandonment of the old easement.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Poole. Any discussion? Not all those in favor of granting the easement to WPS on Packer Drive will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. Claim disallowance. Who'd like to?
That will be me. WMIC is recommending we disallow the claim submitted by Martelli Ray on October 22nd. The reason for the disallowance request is he did not file it with the county clerk. He sent it directly to Corporation Counsel. And he also made allegations against a state agency, which is we are not legally liable for.
Are there any questions relative to the claim that's before us? The recommendation is denial. What are the wishes of the committee? Supervisor Limmer?
I'll make a motion to deny the claim.
The motion to deny, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Supervisor Poole. Any discussion on the motion to deny the claim? Not all those in favor of denial of the claim will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Next, discussion and possible support for AB 559. Supervisor Rosenberg.
Yeah, this is a bill that's coming up tomorrow in front of the Assembly Committee on Local Government. And it's, I'd like to go down and testify for it. If you don't understand the utilities and their substations, the counties don't tax directly power plants, substations, and some other things. the state does, and then they share revenue with us on a formula that's $2,000 per megawatt, and it's divided between the municipalities and the county based on a formula. What we're trying to do with this legislation is to include other sources of energy for electricity, and it includes compressed air, pumped water, flywheels, and liquefied natural gas used for electricity. But I'd like to go down and represent us to do this, to get these increases. We collect about over 2.1 million annually from the state in these payments in lieu of taxes to the county, and we're members of the Wisconsin Counties Utility Tax Association. I've been vice chair of that. You've appointed me over the last 3 terms, or second vice chair, excuse me. But I'm looking for support to go down there and testify to support the bill. It's AB 559, and the companion bill is SB 556.
Are there any questions for Supervisor Rosenberg? Supervisor Lemmer, and then Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lots of questions, really. This is not my wheelhouse, so pardon if they're kind of basic, but just in reading it, I'm not sure how it's paid for. And I would like just a little 101 on that, because it says the Department of Administration will fund it through the public utility account. What is that?
Oh, boy.
I ask because I think there was just a law we passed with the budget saying that we're not going to tax residential utility bills, and I don't know if that's how that gets funded, and so I'm just kind of.
No, it's the state assesses all the electric utilities, gets a number. They collect all that money, and about 30% of it goes back to municipalities and to the county. The county collects 20% of that 30% if it's in a township, and 10%, and the other 20% then goes to the city or village. So what this is saying is they're not changing anything, you're adding these other things which have been out of the formula, and it increases the amount we get. The Wisconsin Counties Utility Tax Association has been pushing for changes to kind of update it. And as electricity evolves, you're going to get more batteries, you're going to get more other sources of electricity, or they'll pump it over a dam and drop it down during the peak times. Anyway, we're trying to collect on that. And the bill's got bipartisan support and is supported by the utilities. It doesn't change the taxes they get. They always pay the same thing to the state, but it changes the amount that we get because more of it comes to us.
My understanding, Supervisor, is that there's an ad valorem tax on the utilities that goes into the state fund, and then that is what we're trying to get distributed to us. So that ad valorem tax, and there's a number of different types of property that are subject to that, but utilities in particular are in, and this is just an expansion of, or the distribution of a portion of that fund back to the counties and local units of government where those activities are located. So we're not changing what's being paid, we're changing the distribution or sharing the distribution back.
So
If I can add just a little bit. So utilities don't pay property tax. So the state collects through the Department of Administration based on a very complex formula, utility generation, value of assets, and a number of other things. They collect money from the utilities. They then, the state, by an equally complex formula, distributes that money back out to the municipalities and counties in which these activities are taking place. My understanding of the bill in a simple explanation is there's more and more activity that the state is considering as quote unquote utility type activity, battery storage facilities, for example. they want to add those new classes of activity to the list of activities that would ultimately, money would come into the state and then money would go out to the counties and municipalities where these activities are taking place. So it's a way to compensate the local units of government where these activities are taking place, where the utilities own property and are not subject to local property tax. So if you think about Weston, the power plant, Rothschild, Cronin-Wetter, and the county all get varying shares based on how much of that utility is located within each of those two respective municipalities, and then the county gets its share. So that's why in the budget book annually, you have a shared revenue column and then a utility tax column as well.
So will this increase what we are projected to get, or is this just to entice new development in Marathon County?
I'm not sure that we have any storage facilities or batteries at this time, but it would increase. And, you know, as things change, for instance, there was a change in the solar farms, winds, you know, those hadn't been included. And there were other things. If Weston were to shut down, that's a lot of money gone from all those budgets. The utility still has to pay it, tapering down over a 10-year scale, so you don't get the shock in the municipalities and in the county. So those are the kind of things that.
Chair Gibbs.
So currently, I think there's at least three that I know of, 3 projects in the county that are at least in the conceptual stage or varying stages of development for wind, and one in the county that is in the development stage for solar. As I understand, part of this legislation would include battery storage. If battery storage is developed in any of those projects, that would then increase the utility tax that the utility would pay to the Department of Administration, which then would impact the portion of utility tax that the county would to receive. But I don't want to indicate that it doesn't come directly from the consumer, because it does, but it comes from the utility because they're not paying property tax on the property that's in the county.
Well, Kurt, just to go back and forth a little bit, the state's still going to collect the money, and they keep 2/3 of it anyway, of what they do. We're only talking about a third of it, or about 30%. It doesn't do anything for the tax that the electric companies are paying. They're paying it either way, but it just ends up in the state and won't end up with us. And the major utilities and co-ops all support it, along with a whole list of others. It's a bipartisan bill. It doesn't include anything under a megawatt, so.
Vice Chair Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does the state collect payment in lieu of taxes for other not-for-profits like hospitals and research facilities? Or is this just restricted to utilities?
As far as I know, it's just restricted to utilities because they have a hard time. A municipality, a county would have a hard time assessing what a power plant is worth and its life and other things. And I think this law was from the 70s. And it remained much the same for years and years. And on the county's utility tax association, we banged our head into the wall for a decade. And then suddenly here last year, we started getting them to move on that and getting more revenue out of that as it went along, so.
I'm not sure if I can weigh in. I'm not sure on your specific example relative to hospitals, whether the state collects from a nonprofit hospital a payment in lieu of taxes, but with respect to utilities, my understanding, and please don't hold me to this, is that the definition of public utilities is somewhat broad. It not only encompasses electric utilities and co-ops, but it would, gas and pipeline activities would be included. Telecommunications, I believe also there's some provisions, but again, don't hold me to that, but I believe the definition in the statutes on public utilities is broader than just power plants that we used as an example.
Supervisor Marshall, I'm not aware of any requirement for nonprofits to pay into the state. Any other questions? What are your wishes? Chair Gibbs?
I would be in support of providing direction to Supervisor Rosenberg to go down and testify on behalf of at least the HR Finance Committee for the support of AB 559 and its companion bill, Senate Bill 556.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Supervisor Lemmer seconds. Any discussion?
I'll abstain on this one.
All right, clerk will note the abstention. Any other questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries. You have your marching orders.
Thank you.
All right, items for discussion, possible action taken to the county board. Carryover items from the last meeting, funding for the Synergy Target Industry and Site Readiness Evaluation. Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item is similar to the next item that's from the Historical Society, but you asked, I think I actually requested the opportunity to go back and look at some potential funding sources for each of the projects. Again, the Synergy Target Industry and Site Readiness Evaluation. The request that was received by the Extension Education Economic Development Committee was for Marathon County to fund $5,000 of that overall project. It's seeking funding from a number of other sources, but the county, the request of Marathon County that was made to the committee, the Extension Education Economic Development Committee, was for $5,000, which they supported and sent to this committee for review. My recommendation is going to be that you look at funding that out of your contingency fund if you support both that request as well as the Historical Society. And just to give you context on your contingency fund through this year, thank you to Sam for running the numbers earlier today. But your original budget, again, is $800,000. You allocated $224,919 for the Schofield mobile home remediation. You funded $200,000. You allocated, I should say, up to $200,000 for homelessness services, and you allocated $125,000 for the replacement of a condenser unit here at the courthouse. Chris has advised that the condenser unit project is no longer a viable alternative for us based on some guidance from regulatory agencies. So that funding is not going to be utilized. Similarly, the Schofield mobile home remediation project, if all goes as planned with respect to that project and the sale goes through with the city of Schofield, the county would be made whole for the out-of-pocket costs that it had in that remediation. So what that means is you effectively would have that $600,000 you'd have available once those monies come back. So given that we're through nearly into November, my thought process would be to utilize those contingency funds. I had hoped to be able to utilize special project funds within the Office of Administration. However, upon going through that budget and projected anticipated future costs remaining the year, talking with Sam, I think we're going to be pretty tight, and my recommendation actually is going to be at the end of the year, any amount that I have left over in that budget, I'm going to be asking for your consideration to move that to the Veterans Service Office to replenish its Veterans Service Commission funds, which have been expended. The county, I'll not get into that at this point, but suffice to say, we haven't filled that bucket in a great many years. But my recommendation, having looked at the budget with Sam and your utilization to this point, would be for both of the projects to utilize contingency fund.
So we'll take them up individually. The first request is for $5,000 for the Synergy Target Industry and Site Readiness Evaluation. It came as a recommendation from the EEDC Committee. What are your wishes? The Administrator's recommendation is we fund it through the contingency fund. Supervisor Lemmer.
I would make that motion to fund it through the contingency fund.
All right, we have a motion to fund the Synergy Target Industry and Site Readiness Evaluation through the contingency fund transfer. Is there a second? Seconded by Chair Gibbs. Any discussion on that motion?
I'm going to oppose this one. I don't think it's a lot of money, but I think it's outside the scope of what county government should be funding.
Any other discussion? Supervisor Marshall? Yes.
Yes, I also oppose this. I noticed that in the examples, the regions that they had given were Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina. All are states with much lower taxes than we have. And therefore, I really think that that probably has more to do with bringing in business than a site readiness would. So I will oppose it. Thank you.
Having sat through the presentation at EEDC, I think the goal here is to get areas of the state on the radar for site developers and to begin to work with local units of government on putting together parcels that are significant in the context of trying to attract those developers' interests. There have been a number of efforts at the state level to get projects ready for development. I think that this is a small investment on the part of the county to hopefully have a site that we could float out there to large developers as they look at trying to locate their businesses. And there are a number of factors that go into site location and decisions, including resources, taxes, labor force, other things. And I think that one of the benefits of being part of this evaluation process is we can put together a parcel, it probably would be a parcel in the county that might be considered for future development. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No.
No.
That motion carries on a 3-2 vote. All right, funding request for the Historical Society relative to the 250th celebration of this country. Administrator Leonard.
Sure, thank you. Similar situation again, the recommendation from the Extension Education Economic Development Committee was to fund at the intermediate level. I believe I'll get to the page in the packet. But it was option number 2 on page, 80 of your packet. The Historical Society appeared before the committee and made a presentation with a number of options as to what its efforts might look like without a county contribution or kind of a tiered solution. Option number 2 is a $20,000 commitment, and option number 3 was $60,000. The committee moved forward a recommendation to fund $20,000. Again, with respect to a proposed funding source, which was what I was tasked with looking into. Again, my recommendation would be your contingency fund. So it's before you for consideration to either move to the full board or fund the committee could fund it with its own internal contingency funds that are allocated through the budget, but in speaking with Chair Robinson, again, if there's question, I think offering the opportunity for the Historical Society to attend the full board meeting to make a presentation does make logical sense from my perspective, of course. Happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for the administrator? In our discussion was that I thought that it was important that this go to the full board for transparency, because it's outside of it's funding for a third party or a partner that we have through the Historical Society, but thought that the full board should look at it versus the committee doing it through its contingency. But both are options. Are there any questions? And I would point out that 50 years ago, the county did participate in a number of activities relative to the 200th anniversary, because I was on the board back then and was in charge of a run through the county, but there were a number of activities that the county participated in. I'm not saying that I'm that old, but it was in an earlier life, I think.
But you're that old.
Just saying. Any discussion, or what are your wishes? What are your wishes? Again, the request is for $20,000 from the Historical Society relative to funding activities surrounding the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country. Supervisor Limmer.
I think it's important to celebrate, and I would make a motion to approve the 20,000 and maybe bring it to the full board as well. I don't know if we can do both.
So funding through the contingency fund.
Yes.
Is there a
I second.
second by Supervisor or Vice Chair Marshall? Any discussion on the motion?
Again, I'm not in favor of this one. I'm not opposed to a good party, but I do think this is outside the scope of what county government should be funding. There are other stakeholders that can fund this.
All right. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor of the request for funding for the Historical Society relative to the 250th anniversary of the country, funding it through the contingency fund, will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no.
No,
That motion carries, but is not unanimous. Thank you. All right, facility, the educational presentation, facilities quarterly update. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I won't read through the handout, but I'll hit the high spots, and then obviously if you have any questions, just let me know. On the first page of the handout, what I'm describing there is that looking at the forecasted price for natural gas, it ranged from $3.90 to $4.50. So when the market was low enough that you could purchase a 12-month strip of natural gas at a price of $3.94, that was at the lower end of the range. I went ahead and did that for 75% of the volume. Basically what that does is it locks in the volume and price for the year, which is more predictable for budgets. There's still 25% of volume that's left on the market, which fluctuates, each day and throughout the seasons. But that strategy helps mitigate any risk from any number of the factors that make price go up and down. Similarly, looking ahead, the market is positioned in a way that's sort of backward from what you would expect, where future years are cheaper than current year. So I'm looking at options to do the same kind of thing for future years, again, to provide some predictability and stability to a budget that can, as you know from previous years, get pretty interesting. The chart there on the bottom of the page basically is showing you that over the last 3 years, natural gas use has gone down. I think that's largely attributed to the board's decision to move forward with these building renovations, which included HVAC system upgrades, and all the modern equipment is going to be more efficient than what was in there. Similarly, the buildings were redesigned in a way that allowed the more modern and efficient machinery to cover buildings in a way that was less centralized. So it really helps mitigate the amount of use throughout the year. So assuming that continues to hold, I'd anticipate 25 coming in as you would expect, moving up towards getting more use in the winter months, but still lower than what we've seen historically. And this chart, I should say too, reflects all of our meters that are very high volume, like the jail, North Central Healthcare, the lion's share of all costs for the natural gas. On the second page, I wanted to touch on a unique opportunity we had to work with a vendor in the state that basically goes into the building after 5 years and balances the HVAC systems and the chiller systems. And what that does is it allows you to take advantage of a focus on energy project, which helps contribute funds toward the project. But even without those funds, the cost of bringing them in to balance everything, the return on investment on that is 13 months. So after 13 months, we're effectively even with the focus on energy funds, but had there been no assistance there, after 13 months, we'd be realizing all those gains, savings, I should say. And that also helps the machines run more efficiently because I think the best way to put it is people who put a machine into your facility aren't paying the bills. And so you bring other people in who can help fine tune the machine and get it to a set point that is maybe not as high as somebody who's installing it would like to see because it's easier, but get it to a point where you're actually making the machine run more efficiently and using less energy. The chart there, I'm just showing the black circle is where those, there's some simultaneous heating and cooling that you wouldn't expect to see in those middle months. So that's really the opportunity for savings on a natural gas profile. That is also going to expand once we go into phase 2 of this work because they initially focused on the chiller plant and now they're going to move towards the air handlers and other associated equipment. So that campus will get more dialed in tight from their perspective and also just from the energy use expense perspective. So we'll realize even more savings per square foot and less energy use once they're done with their work. And once they complete that second phase, I'll bring back the full report on that as well. I did make a note that in the months of May and October, those months look like outliers, and they are, and you'd expect them to be because of the shoulder seasons. The weather is so variable. You're dealing with outside air conditions that are changing rapidly, so you're doing more simultaneous heating and cooling there to maintain the building temps, and that's not unusual. On the following page, I just want to give you an update on the library chiller project. I included bills for the library meter that fed the previous equipment, and you can see in 24 we paid just shy of $115,000 for water. And so that's a significant savings in the sense that that water is no longer being used. So that's immediate savings, but of course the new system is using more electricity. So now what I'll do is look at the net gain in electric use and then subtract it against the savings to show you what really are you gaining per year. The other thing I think about this project is it's a good example of one where ARPA funding helped the county invest into something that will provide this equipment for the library for 20 to 25 years. And each of those years, you'll be getting that net savings between the offset of the water bill and the cost of running the new equipment. But I'll do a full analysis and bring that to you as well. But this was just one that over the years really was surprising to me in terms of what was there and then what we moved to. On staffing for facilities, we've got 4 retirements in January. 2 of those are our grounds team. So in the spirit of Public Works, I'm going to be meeting with Parks, Recreation, and Forestry to discuss sort of the long-term future of those positions because they're effectively doing things that Parks does very well. It may not be a good fit at the end of the day, but it's important to have that discussion to see, like, are they more appropriately housed in Parks, but still located on the campus to do the work. So there's a logic to that. I think Parks will have some interesting insight as well. But our near-term situation is that with them retiring in January, we've come up with a strategy to get us from January to, say, May. Because with that, they do most of the snow removal on the campus. So even though they're departing, we've got a plan in place already just within facilities to address any snow removal efforts that we'll need to do, even though those folks are now gone. So we've already begun planning that and had meetings, and we shouldn't really experience any change in level of service. And then it's also given us an opportunity to think about how might we approach snow removal on that campus differently too. On the next page, I should say, this was a request on carrying costs for Thomas Street and River Drive properties. I should say that the estimates here are likely to be lower than what you see in the document, but on the utility costs, you'll see that River Drive's total is $22,000, $23,000 per year. That's using some historical data. They haven't been vacant buildings for the entire year. So I'm extrapolating a bit from what I did know and then being somewhat conservative about it, but also anticipating that that number will be lower with people out of that facility. Similarly, with Thomas Street, most of that building has been vacant for some time after social services moved, but we know that the credit union has found a new home. So when they transition to their new space, then that property will be completely vacant. So that utility cost should also go down. But as they are, the sort of ceiling, if you will, but obviously it should be lower, is approximately $50,000 per year for covering the utilities of all those buildings. The vacant property coverage from insurance, I spoke with risk management about this, and currently the county's policy has a $15,000 deductible. There's been some discussions about changing that, but working with what we have as knowns today, the cost to insure River Drive, the three buildings at River Drive and Thomas Street, is roughly $13,500 per year for the vacant property coverage. I should also note that there are elevators in the buildings, they have inspections, but generally speaking, if things are going well and those are more routine, they don't present a significant burden in terms of costs, and they still need to be done regardless. So this would be the bulk of all costs that the county has to carry those buildings until their future is decided. Just a quick note on the highway project update. Everything's going very well there. We anticipate getting a conceptual drawing updated with all the site work analysis that started this week in November. And we are working with the families who are still living there, making sure that they're aware that, somebody will be out there to be, looking for lines, things like that. So we're keeping that communication open. They have my phone number. They know if they have questions or issues or anything like that, they can get a hold of me. That's gone very well. And then, of course, once we get through the schematic design phase and have a better sense of how things are looking, we'll be back to the committee looking towards consideration by the committee and ultimately the county board to consider moving to the next phase of design development. So more to come there. On the UWSP Wausau UWMC front, I just wanted to make sure people knew that since we've learned about the transition of their operations to the North Central Technical College campus, Administrator Leonard and I, have had several meetings with UW staff and leadership, talking with them about their campus exit plans, the things that are on their mind that they need to deal with, and how we can dovetail with that and help facilitate the work that they're doing, but also understanding the sort of things that they had in play, like they had some subleases in that space, and so they letting us know when are they asking those people to vacate, those sorts of things, so that there's a sort of a more global understanding of the campus and what's been going on there than we might have had previously. Last week, facility staff and we also met with their facilities director and maintenance and custodial staff to get a better understanding of the building from a sort of day-to-day perspective, because we've been involved on the capital project front. We've been really involved in getting their HVAC where it needs to be, but a lot of that day-to-day stuff we're not aware of. So we spent a couple hours with them picking their brains about all kinds of information, and compiling all that into sort of a record of what one can anticipate or what are the issues there as they're known up to date. I also want to give a shout out to Chris Berg from Wausau Public Access, and he's the theater and media manager at the Civic Center as well. He's apparently come up with a side gig where he's taken a lot of the architectural drawings for the campus and updated them. They're up to date, square footage numbers, purposes, all kinds of information related to the campus, the spaces, the buildings, and their uses. And that's going to be extremely helpful to bring back to this committee and the board so that everybody can understand what actually is the footprint that we're working with. And I'm going to be working with Administrator Leonard to compile much of that information into a format that's available for upcoming committee and board meetings and discussions. And lastly, just two things that are a really big deal for us. but are probably not on most people's radar. We attended the Wisconsin Facilities Management Association Fall Conference in Jackson County last week. There were several topics discussed, but there's two really big ones. And one of them is that Wisconsin adopted the 2021 International Building Codes. This is new in the sense that we were working with 2015 previously, but there was a legislative objection, if you will, that then the Supreme Court ended up ruling in Evers versus Markland, where they said the indefinite objection was unconstitutional and overturned. That opened up the door for Wisconsin to effectively jump from 2015 to the 2021 codes. What this does is it affects most anything you can think of related to a facility, especially with new buildings, whether that's design, the building of the facility, inspection, what people are looking for, maintenance, things like that. There are some costs involved too, but ultimately it's from the architects to the people doing the building to people taking care of it. There's a whole litany of new codes and information to understand. And we attended a couple sessions when this first came out, but it was really kind of superficial, kind of like the information I'm giving you now. So it wasn't super useful to us in terms of trying to understand the implications. But early next month, we've got a 4-hour session that should have a lot more meat on the bone for helping us to understand the implications for facilities as a department, but also what we can anticipate with projects like the highway facility, things like this that will clearly be impacted by the adoption of the new codes. And then, as Administrator Leonard mentioned earlier, the air handler unit that I previously came to the committee for funding, that was ultimately a situation where the information we were getting from the vendors and others, and manufacturers we were working with was in conflict with itself. So I dug into the federal regulations and read, about 60 to 70 pages to understand the story, and then got myself into a better position where I could point out, like, look, it says here, you can't do this. And so long story short, and many weeks of back and forth, that the AIM Act and the new EPA rules for refrigerants, we understand them better, but that's another area where we're gonna need to have additional training for staff. We're gonna need to know when you get new equipment, what does that entail? It's new refrigerants, new air handlers, everything is different. There's a low degree of flammability involved, less toxic than other refrigerants, but this is something that's new to everybody in the industry, from manufacturers to end users. And that is my update.
All right. Chris, thank you for that, gathering the information relative to the utilization of the therms. Do we have a similar report, or could we get a similar report relative to kilowatts at some point in the future relative to our utilization?
Yeah, the initial chiller plant work saved approximately 200,000 kilowatt hours. So that will then grow as they expand their work to the air handling side. So the full report at the end, it gets broken down into a cost savings per square foot, but that final report will show you the ultimate, like, overall reduction from the balancing work and fine tuning of all the valves and flow meters and everything in the systems, and give you a sort of in aggregate, here's how many fewer kilowatt hours you're using and therms, and then the cost savings per square foot. So I'll bring that back once that's completed.
And then secondly, as it relates to the highway facility, I know that we had discussions relative to energy efficiency components of that design. And I hope that we continue to make that a priority relative to the overall net operating cost for that facility on a long-term basis.
Yeah, we included that in the RFP as well, to say, like, we need to look at it from, the state has a suite of, approaches and how you look at that. So we made sure that we said we want to look at all those options as part of the design process. And
The life cycle cost would be part of that. Chair Gibbs.
First off, Chris, thank you. Great report. The one question I had on the holding costs on these properties, and we've got utilities, and do we continue to do snow removal? I would imagine we do on the Thomas Street property because of the credit union still occupying there. But do we still do? Are we going to, or is the plan to still do snow removal on the other properties on River Drive?
It's a great question. We met with Parks 2 weeks ago to come up with, we meet with them every year prior to snow season. For River Drive, what we're doing is we're maintaining half of the lot where library staff park, and then basically we're just going to push one line to the door for 212, so that we can still have clear access to the front door. So it's a much less work there. And the lot also gives you a lot of place to push and store snow if needed. And then Thomas Street, we work directly with Jamie Olcott at the bank to say what does she need for her customers? And then I think they do a little more than they might need to there, but it's a much larger equipment, so it kind of goes quicker and easier than you'd think. But yeah, we've certainly looked at doing that.
But I really wasn't concerned about the cost because I think it was insignificant, but I did want to know if we had plans to continue to provide emergency access to those buildings if needed. Thank you.
Supervisor Poole?
Just a thought, it's not very well fleshed out yet, but reading through the budget, I thought I recalled that there was a specific maintenance fund for the dorm building at UW Marathon. I'm wondering if that could be used just to demolish the site, instead of just paying ongoing maintenance for it.
That's another good question. The dorm fund has layers of restrictions to it, but that has been discussed with prior UW administration. And I can't remember exactly what the last letter said, but I'm pretty sure that part of the use that from UW's perspective to use those funds was towards exactly what you mentioned. Should the county move forward with that kind of a project, those funds could go toward it.
Well, that's a good segue. We will be having the joint meeting with the Extension Education Economic Development Committee on November 6th to talk about the process by which we will evaluate what's happening at the UWMC campus. Any other questions? So we can, I know that there have been some people in the community, Supervisor Poole, that have expressed an interest in that building. I know that I think that's one of the things we'll have to work through and set up the process for. Vice Chairman Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know, Chris, you had said that I think we can use that. Is there some way that we can have a definitive answer before that meeting next week as to if those funds could be used to demolish that building, given its condition is not conducive to actually renovation?
Oh, yep. The finance director just gave me the letter that I had in my mind, but I couldn't think of verbatim. But in this letter, let's see. Therefore, both parties agree that using a dormitory maintenance fund is a permitted use under the agreement toward demolition of the existing structure under the recommendations of the West Side Master Plan. So the last letter we received from UW leadership is saying that from their point of view, those funds are allowed for that use.
Just to clarify
Thank you.
also, there's about $171,000 in that fund last time Sam checked. And Chris, what did we ballpark the demolition of that building at?
I think it depends on the scope of work, but I think generally speaking, you're looking at $15 per square foot. It's probably approaching $1 million, primarily because if that building by itself is being demolished, you have the railroad on one side, you've got the campus on the other, and a residential area. So it's a complicated work site to get that done for staging not only the equipment, but the materials themselves as you move them off. So this is a real high level number. We reached out to people to get a really high level estimate. So it could be lower than that, but I think it would not be surprising to be in that $750,000 to $1 million range. And just for comparisons, it was roughly $400,000 for the cold storage demolition there on West Street. So much smaller overall. There's a lot of material there with concrete and whatnot, but the dorm is robust in terms of construction and materials.
And I think Supervisor or Vice Chair Marshall, you bring up a good point. At the next meeting, Chris and I have had those initial conversations with the UW and given some thought to what are some potential funding streams for redevelopment, and we can get into more of that next week. But one of those is the the state fund for redevelopment that WEDC holds, and we have $2 million that arguably we'd be eligible for either direct redevelopment or even for redevelopment planning, but we can bring you at a high level some of that information next week.
Any other questions? If not, thank you for that report. The next is the county clerk's quarterly update. Kim is ill today, so we're going to delay that and get until next month or next meeting to give her a chance to recover and give a presentation. Unless we look to you. That was emphatic. All right. General 2026 budget discussion, including update on revised general transportation aid projection for 2026 in consideration of next steps.
I can kick it off. We got good news. The general transportation aid documentation we received at the end of September was slightly above what we put into we developed into the budget. It is $3,159,678, which is about $194,678 above what was built into the proposed budget. Before we get too excited about that good news, it's important always to temper that with what we get in terms of an estimate from the state. We are not always going to receive that amount. Sam did a nice job to put together a little summary of where we've been over the last several years. It's generally close, but the state statute does allow for it to be a 10% shortfall. But anything I'm missing on that, Sam? Keep me honest if I'm off base. What was that? Oh, by Mary Hartwig. Oh, sorry. I'll give credit to both Sam and Mary Hartwig from Highway. But the numbers are normally close. But again, just to be cautious, in 2015, for example, we did receive just shy of $75,000 less than what our initial preliminary estimate was. So question before you, one of the questions before you, and then certainly any conversation you want to have on any other topics, is how do you want to address this in the ultimate budget adoption?
Just historically, we've gotten the estimate or received the estimate from the state late in the budget process. And years ago, if there was a decrease in general transportation aids, the county board's propensity was to cut spending on highway activities. And what happened is we started getting into this new loop or this spiral down because we kept cutting while other communities were increasing their spending. And so our share went down every year based on that 6-year average. I asked that we put it on the agenda just to begin to think about it. And I think some of the options would be, are there some projects that we could incorporate in to maintain our general transportation aid going forward? Or is there an opportunity for us to reduce the use of reserves in the highway department going forward? Or are there other priorities in the budget that would merit consideration of the use of those funds? The budget's currently frozen until after the public hearing, which will occur next Monday. But I thought, it is good news, and it's something I just wanted to make sure the committee was aware of as we entered into the deliberations on the final budget. And thank you, Sam and Mary, for preparing that information. But just to try to enlighten you as to where we are and try to keep current with what those estimates are. Sam?
I think the only additional context that I would put into there is that the funds applied or the reserve usage in 2026's budget currently for the highway department is $5,333,771.
Chair Gibbs.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the good news. But I think we need to temper it a little bit in the fact that there is the provision to have a variance of up to 10%. I guess my preference would be that we move that into highway reserve. It's obviously restricted for highway project or highway use. Since we're already spending over $6 million, and if I remember, at least the summary of where highway reserve was after dedicating that 30 million for the potential new highway shop, there was $64,000 left in the highway reserve. So my propensity would be to put the increase estimate, at least on highway funds, into the highway reserve fund.
And that would make it available in the future as we approach the new highway facility as well.
Right.
Any other questions relative to this or the budget in general? Again, we'll have that hearing next week, and then all the committees will have an opportunity to provide input right up through November 11th. Vice Chair Marshall?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's also important to remember that it has been more than 10 years or 10 years since we've had the state exercise that ability to shortfall their general transportation aid. And currently our proposed levy increase is double what Social Security recipients will be receiving as an increase for cost of living. So I think that it's important to remember those two things as we decide what to do with this additional $194,000 that we anticipate. Thank you.
Anything else on the budget? All right, we will move on to the State of Wisconsin Innovation Grant, overview of the program and discussion of potential application in Marathon County. Administrator Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was something that Chair Robinson wanted to talk about at this committee. And just for context, the Innovation Grant Fund goes back a couple of years. It was created in 2023. And really the desire was to give incentive to local units of government, cities, counties, villages, and towns to look at what are the opportunities for consolidation of services. And some important changes were made to the program. And I put in there's a document from the Counties Association magazine that was drafted by Attorney Andy Phillips that summarizes some of those changes. Just for context, I go to quarterly meetings that are organized by McDevco with municipal leaders from throughout the county, and I can't think of one of them that I've been to that I haven't brought up the innovation grant program or the innovation fund program. That said, to this point, we haven't had any interest expressed from municipalities, I should say up until about a month ago. But the changes I think are important. The summary of what the program was before, you needed to show that the consolidation was actually going to reduce costs. And there were some other things that you needed to do throughout the life of the program. You needed to show that you would achieve half of the projected savings within a relatively short time period, that is within 3 years. A lot of those changes, a lot of those requirements were modified recently through Act 15. Specifically, one of the, what I think is the chief among them is the idea that the consolidation needs to show a reduction in cost. And I can't speak to why the legislature made those changes. I can brainstorm, and my initial thought would be with the increased costs that they're seeing in a lot of these services, kind of the short time horizon in the original program really didn't get a lot of use. So all that to say, if you take a look at that summary document. I think there is a potential for these services, the consolidations to occur. Marathon County, quite honestly, if we hadn't already formed North Central Healthcare, if we hadn't already formed City County IT, if we hadn't already done the works with the Parks Department and the ADRC, these would all be things that we could seek to apply to this fund for. So I think we've seen the benefit of these consolidations or intergovernmental agreements to look at alternative service delivery. My recent conversation has been with the sheriff's office and with a local municipality around the potential for consolidation or service transfer relative to law enforcement. So again, we actually have that already with the village of Rib Mountain. The sheriff's office previously entered into a service contract for that. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say for some of our smaller municipalities, law enforcement, delivering law enforcement services is a challenge. It's a challenge to retain and recruit in that space, particularly in small departments. So we did have a conversation with a local municipality that is experiencing some of those challenges, just to talk at a very high level about what their current budget looks like. And I was provided that, and as was the sheriff. So we'll have more conversations. Of course, we wouldn't proceed with anything unless and until we develop that proposal with the village and then had support from the requisite standing committees and the full board to move forward. But just something to put on your radar that you may hear more about. And if you see opportunities and want to provide that feedback to administration, I'm happy to take it. But I do bring this up every quarterly meeting with my colleagues from municipalities throughout the county, what opportunities exist. The act is written to give priority to public safety services, so law enforcement, fire, EMS. But certainly there are other potential opportunities as well.
Chair Gibbs.
Lance, I think one of the major changes that you alluded to was that the cost cannot, well, now under the new rules or under the guidance that was discussed, at least on the WCA leadership call the other morning, was that the cost over the period of time, over the contracted period of time, cannot increase over 115% of current costs. Is that more accurate?
It cannot be 115%, so it can't go up by 15, but you're correct, yep.
Which is a significant deviation from what the proposed rules were originally before.
That is correct. I believe it was, you had to show that there was a
25%.
10% reduction previously, and with challenges that exist in terms of service contracts, that's my sense as to why they made the change. But certainly the program has been updated to allow for that 15% cost increase. I will say one of the things we need to look at, and I'm going to reach out to the Department of Revenue on this, whether or not the program is actually based on, and the calculation is based on a municipality's actual cost to deliver the service or their budgeted costs, and why I think that's important. I'll use the law enforcement example that I alluded to before. If you're a small municipal law enforcement agency and you have significant turnover, if you think about a municipality that maybe has 1 or 2 full-time staff and a couple of reserve staff, if you have a vacancy in one of your full-time positions and you go half a year without filling that, your actual costs are far less than what your budgeted costs for the service you would like to deliver are. If the program uses the budget as a base for the service delivery, the analysis might be fundamentally different than if we're restricted to using actual costs. But nonetheless, it's something I'll follow up with DOR on. But I would foresee that this is going to continue. in the meeting that I attended with the local municipalities, when I brought up this program again, a representative was present from Rib Mountain, and the first thing they said was, it's working great. The local law enforcement contract they have with the sheriff's office, they really are happy with the service. So I think you're going to see more and more of this in your smaller municipalities. I know I have colleagues that in northern part of the state were initially looking to utilize this for consolidating emergency dispatch services, so that two counties would essentially share a dispatch. I don't know I think that moved forward, but it actually moved forward outside of this innovation grant program. But nonetheless, you may hear more about it as Chair Robinson and Chair Gibbs referenced. This was on the WCA weekly call.
The reason that I asked that we put it here, I know Supervisor Poole has talked about operational efficiencies as well as other members have, and we identified it as part of the committee's work plan. I think that this creates an opportunity for limited situations for us to look at how do we go about partnering with others relative to the provision of services. And it's something that we ought to take a good hard look at. It would be nice if the list was a broader list, but it is what it is. And the last page of the packet has the eligible activities pursuant to information that was pulled together by Atola's Law for the Wisconsin Counties Association. But we just wanted to plant the seed to get county board members thinking about potential opportunities for us to engage in discussions relative to sharing services and hopefully reducing costs and taking advantage of this grant program. Any questions? Chair Gibbs.
So I guess just a question is, has there been any discussions about NCHC and potentially some of their programming or some of their departments merging potentially with Marathon County and potentially creating some savings?
Only at a very high level that you've been a part of. Again, I don't know where those would rank on the list that is on the last page of your packet. But yeah, at a high level, I think, that is an opportunity. I know that going back quite a number of years ago, this was before I was in county administration, I know there was talk about merging certain activities with the city of Wausau beyond Parks, Rec, and Forestry. There was discussion about, human resources work before, or I think there's a lot of opportunities. My sense is from talking with my colleagues that the number of applications that the state has received has been less than they initially expected, which is part of the reason for the changes.
Supervisor Limmer.
We've talked about consolidating our administration, the finance really team. Would that apply here? Because it looks like letter I does talk about some of that. So is that an opportunity to get that moving?
With what entity?
Well, I know, for instance, the ADRC is using Marathon County more for finance and is budgeting to use that more. Would that be an opportunity to capture some of that?
I don't know. We are cooperating more. I don't know if it's that's something we could look at. We'll have to dive into that a little bit.
I think those are the types of ideas that we'd like to just get out there so we can look at whether there are some benefits and long-term savings associated with the efficiency. So please, put your thinking caps on, and if there are other possibilities, let Administrator Leonard know. But it's a great grant. I think it's a one-time, I don't know if it will be continued through subsequent budgets. I know it's been slow in the rollout, but there are opportunities as a result of the funding on the state level.
Yeah, the fiscal, I believe it's continued the funding is available through 6 fiscal years. The contract that you need to have, the agreement you need to have between the municipal entities has to be at least 3 years long. I believe it can be up to 5 to take advantage of those 6 years. So the opportunity is certainly there. Because it is a 25, again, don't hold me to this, it's in the paperwork, but I believe it's a 25% payment from the Department of Administration for the total cost to deliver the service each of those years that you're eligible.
All right, anything else on the innovation grant? More to come. All right. Next meeting, our actual next meeting is a joint meeting with EDC on Thursday, the 6th. So the date in here is wrong. That's at 3 o'clock here. Are there other items that the committee would like to have us talk about post-budget? If you can think of anything, please let me know. We will continue to, I know that the issue of how we're going to approach health insurance into the future and their benefit package will be one that we will be talking about. We'll continue to look at some of the facilities issues that Chris has alluded to, and please let me know what else you'd like to talk about in the future. Again, the reminder that on Monday, the 3rd, we have the county board hearing on the budget. And with that, we're down to item 8. Moved by Chair Gibbs to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Marshall. All those in favor of adjournment will signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries.